Well, welcome.
Hey, everybody. This is my impression of Josh on a podcast. Josh, I'm throwing to you in 3, 2.
I hate this guy.
All right, throw us in. Let's go.
All right. Well, welcome back to How Stupid People Succeed. I'm Josh. This is Jeremy. And this is How Stupid People Succeed. Before we get into this, Jeremy, I want to share with everybody. Now we are on Apple. So finally. So you can go to the podcast app in Apple and subscribe to us. You are on YouTube, Spotify, and obviously on our Facebook page. It's really been really cool how we've been getting all this love and views and this feedback from everything that we've been doing. It's been really cool.
It's been really cool. And hopefully we'll be on Instagram soon. We got to get that figured out. There is a pretty emotional, heartfelt story coming our way. I think I'm the only one of us that actually know the story. But from Elizabeth's podcast and one of our viewers, there was a pretty amazing connection made that could possibly result in a family adopting a child.
Really?
Yes.
That's super cool.
Really cool. So I don't have all the details
Thanks
yet.
for letting me know this on air.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
But we'll try to get the facts of it figured out because obviously with something like that big, I don't want to talk about it until I.
What's the family's name?
What's their name,
their
address,
social security number,
which they'll have to do to go through that process because it's a bear.
Yeah.
It's serious, but
that's super cool.
We won't talk about that here. Which great segue. Biggest risk.
Biggest risk.
Adoption. If my wife said, Jeremy, we need to adopt, I would just puke in a bucket for probably about 2 days straight. That's a huge, huge risk. Yeah. But in being successful, I think the measure of success is typically matched by the level of risk. So if you're just accomplishing something or you're navigating within your wheelhouse, maybe you're gifted in a certain area or maybe you're just more talented than somebody, I don't really consider that success. Me personally, I don't consider success something that you do a lot that comes easy to you. So you look at somebody that's maybe more talented at the game of golf because I'm horrible at it, right? Some people just have a knack to be able to play something better, do something better, understand something better. That's great, but show me the work that has gone in or show me the risks that have been taken that then warrant that level of success. So with you in your life, there's been a lot of transitions, a lot of decisions and everything like that made. What's an example of a big risk that you took in your life?
There's several.
Were you listening?
Yes, okay. I was listening. I mean, are you talking professionally or are you talking personally?
Anyone. The one that probably hit you in the pit of your stomach the most. Because risk is not, it sounds great when you're talking about it. It sounds great when you're planning to do it and you're bragging about, or you're sharing your idea. It sounds great in a book on the flip side of, the successes is part of your story. Now, it's horrible in the moment you actually, jump off the cliff.
Yeah. Well, I think for me personally, one of the biggest risks that I've taken is, if obviously my wife Amanda, and so a few years ago we bought a house here in Merriam. It's a really big house, and we got the idea of, since the house is so big, let's consolidate our house and my in-laws' house. So my in-laws live with us. And that was, for me, that was a super big risk of, hey, this is like getting out of this and working around it. And if we want to get out, it's virtually impossible.
Right.
So making that commitment was really, really big risk for me. But I like to go back to one of the things we talk about, something you mentioned about risks is, we could say something, hey, hopping into real estate, hopping in the car business is a risk. Things like that, at the moment they become, obviously they are a risk, but the more you're in it, the more you do it, the less risk it becomes. So the more I'm into real estate, for instance, the more risk I can take because I understand it. I know how to operate in it. I know the ins and outs and things like that. So when you say risk, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken? I think of something, it's kind of like that ground moment, I'm standing out front, getting ready to open a door. I have no idea what's behind this door. That's it. So figuratively speaking, that door was our house where we live now. And But, there's been so many great things that have come from the risks. So you learn about yourself. You learn about how patient you can be with other people. Obviously, having kids was a huge risk. That's turned out amazing so far. And, there's so many different risks. But the one risk that I can think of off the top of my head, it would be living with basically a lifetime commitment of living with my in-laws.
Yeah.
And I know for a lot of people that's not possible. And I'm very thankful that we have a really good relationship with them. And our setup in the house is super nice. So, we don't have to see him if we don't want to see him. Mm-hmm. That's been super cool. But I'm really curious about your biggest risk, because I know your big risks obviously have been more professional than anything.
Yeah.
And they're risks that I don't know if I'd be willing to take ever.
Yeah, I've taken some pretty big shots.
Yeah.
And
go big or go home.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I definitely had that. It's definitely been a part of my personality ever since. I've always been comfortable, if that even makes sense. I've always been more comfortable taking risks than being comfortable taking it easy. I don't like the idea of taking it easy. So there's this level of intensity for me. So when I was a kid and I felt invincible, it looked like a lot, just doing a lot of random, probably really, really dumb physical things.
Broken wrists.
Yeah. Broken arms, noses, all that stuff. No shortage of blood and scars on my body. So took a 4-wheeler and basically wrapped it around a tree. It's the only time I ever saw my uncle, because it was my cousin's 4-wheeler. It's the only time I ever saw my uncle actually yell at me. And I think in the heat of the moment, he was so terrified that I was going to be dead, because he was sitting inside probably 200 yards away. He was at some house out in the county, and he heard the 4-wheeler hit the tree. And the second he heard it, he knew it was bad. So he comes running out, and sure enough, only by the grace of God, I wasn't wearing a helmet. Somehow, some way, I hit a tree head on, and my body didn't hit the tree at all. I flipped beside the tree. So the idea of...
So no brain damage?
Some. Doctors... yeah, there's a lot of CTE in there somewhere, I'm sure. But for me, risk... the idea of average has never thrilled me. So anytime I feel like I'm operating, even in my own personal gauge of what I consider to be average, it really starts to bother me. And that's not necessarily, when we talk about success, it's not all wrapped up in just what we're doing for work. It also means relationships. Like when I feel like my personal relationships are starting to kind of get mundane or average, that really bothers me a lot. When I look around and I see that I'm settling in a way that I can go into autopilot and I'm just kind of behaving, that really bothers me. So I always got to find a way to kind of feed that beast. And I think over time, because I've taken so many risks, I understand what to feed the beast and what not to feed the beast. So again, back to working out or competition. So earlier in my life, I was competitive and I was obsessive about certain things. And now that I'm an adult, I have to understand how to place that, right? So when we go work out at the gym, that's not the opportunity for me to feed the beast. It's like you hear the old adage, the church league softball studs.
That's you.
False. First of all, terrible at baseball. Second of all, slow pitch softball's that's mind numbing to me.
I'm thinking about playing this year. Actually,
you should. You're really good at it.
Yeah, I was.
But there's been a lot of biggest risks. I think the biggest risk, probably the one that caused the most challenge in my relationship. I had this job at JP Morgan. I worked for them in Florida. Then we moved up here, and I started working for them in Columbus. And this is right after basically the market fell out through 2007 to about 2010, and I had survived that whole just layoff extravaganza. So in Columbus, the size of the JP Morgan headquarters in Columbus is about the same square footage as the Empire State Building laid on its side. And it's about 3 floors high, but it has all these wings coming off of it that are, I forget exactly how long they're, but they're over 100-yard long wings with 3 floors in them. It's nothing but just a sea of cubicles. And I remember going through that time frame, and from the door that goes out into the main terminal to the wing, I watched row after row of people get laid off, and And fortunately, I made it through that and was able to, keep my job and perform enough that I had value. But I got to a point where I just felt like I had hit a cap and I needed to change some stuff up. This is advice, like, we talked to Joe about starting a business and, don't do it. I would never tell anybody, walk out of your really nice, good job. Never. But I knew what I had to be true to myself. So it made me feel sick. I prepped for probably about a week before I talked to my wife. I sat her down, fully ready, fully prepared in my mind. The second she flips out that I'm saying I'm going to quit my job, I'm going to retract, and then I'm going to go back to work, and I'm not going to quit my job, okay? Because, we have to be on the same page with this because it's a huge risk. And if we were on the same page, it definitely probably would have been the end of our marriage. So I sit her down and I go, hey, I want to quit JP Morgan. She goes, great, I think you should do it. and then that's the moment when the risk was like, boom, in your gut. Okay, now I have to make this happen.
Yeah.
And when I went through that, it was definitely a test. But here I am, almost 10 years later, and I'm extremely fortunate that I took that risk. However, there were some extremely, extremely challenging, tough times going through that period.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in the risk that I experienced, I definitely realized there's a lot of, it teaches you a lot because you feel so exposed when you take a risk. It teaches you a lot about how you manage your own mental conversation and also how you manage what you feel like the pressures and the stresses are of other people around you. So in the risk you took, so you're living with your in-laws, which is something I love my in-laws. I love my parents, but I think Brittany and I both, it's something that we would never, ever do.
Yeah.
But in that risk and managing that, how do you then work through the challenges or the issues that come up?
Well, the issues and the challenges that come up for me, like I kind of alluded to the conversation we had about marriage, right? So, there became a point where I had to make the decision that not being married was not an option. And I just have to figure it out. So even in the challenging times when, so it's me, my wife, my 3 kids, our 2 in-laws, our 2 dogs, you have to just make the decision like, okay, we're going to make it work. And like, it's funny, like some of the challenges that you have, you wouldn't even think about having, because, when we had our own house before that, it was like, I know I'm taking care of all this stuff. And then,
Right.
you move into this combined household, which is obviously it's real popular in the East, but in the Western world, like we really don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And, so like, I love the outdoor space. I love the outdoor, like yards, like cutting grass. Like I love that stuff. And obviously, with dogs, there are other challenges with the dogs outside too. But like we got to a point, my father-in-law and I, where like we were just assuming he was going to do something or I was going to do something. And then got to a point where it wasn't getting done at all. And then, like I become super upset. He becomes super upset. And then, like we have kind of like this clash of, okay,
Yeah.
why the hell aren't you doing these things? And like, listen, so I love my father-in-law, but he's very passive aggressive when it comes to a lot of the stuff. So he'll just let a lot of this stuff stew and stew and stew. And then, but he won't say anything to me, but he'll complain to my mother-in-law, and then my mother-in-law won't tell me, she'll tell my wife.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like the telephone game you used to play in elementary school. It's like, well, he said this and this and this. And then you go back, it's like, it's all blown out of proportion. Then I'll go to him. I'll be like, hey, like, what's up with that? And he's like, oh yeah. I mean, if you do that, that's great. So like, but it's just, I've learned, and I am still learning, just the value in the communication when it comes to those things.
Mm-hmm.
Just communicating what you expect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important.
Yeah. So in what you're saying, if you take it, like in my situation, I took my risk, made sure my wife was on board. That's the only person we didn't have kids at the time. So that's the only person in my life that I legitimately cared to have the approval of.
Yeah.
in your situation, obviously, you and Amanda talked about it probably ad nauseum before you made the move. You guys continue to have a positive relationship. But I think if you're going to take a risk by yourself, which is a really, really, really stupid thing to do, you also have to realize you're probably going to fail by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And even in a situation of, let's say you take a risk by yourself, you're probably going to feel that lonely level of success by yourself.
Yeah.
I think risks should definitely be taken. If you want them to be a successful risk, they should definitely be taken with the buy-in of people that have to be part of that success.
Or people even that care about you.
Yeah, people that even care about you. Now, I will say on the flip side, when you do take a big risk, like with me with JP Morgan, I heard all sorts of things that were said about me. All sorts of things.
Yeah. I still hear them.
Yeah, you still hear them all the time. But in my family at that time, nobody in my family across both sides of the family had ever had a job like I had.
Yeah.
And so, and then on my dad's side, I was one of the first to, graduate from college in the first place. On my mom's side, I was one of the first to really like jump out into this big world. Most of them on that side were in like education or different government businesses. So it's not really the same challenges. They all had something to say about, how lazy I was or how stupid I was or how crazy I was or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, going back to it, you also have to model your level of risk and your level of success off of the people that you're mirroring and mentoring your life off of.
Yeah.
Which, even back to your thing, there's also some cultural normalities that you can't let affect your risk either. Again, like, so you live with your in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
When some of the places we've traveled, it's cousins, aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa all live in this mega mansion together.
Yeah.
And they go in and they buy up basically like almost a whole city block, and they all
Yeah.
live on a compound together.
Yeah.
It's pretty remarkable to think about. But then you think, when you see that and you see the success that those family has, it kind of makes you step back and go, okay, culturally, are we really doing this the best way possible?
Yeah.
Right. So for me, working at JP Morgan, it's like, life-wise, stress-wise, am I really doing this the best way possible? Is this really the best outlet for me to live my career? So it's all individualized. It's all specific, but I also think there's a way in handling the conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So with kind of to summarize, with you going through that, and even now, how do you try to manage the conversation with your wife to make sure, okay, we've taken the risk, it's going good, let's like keep it good?
What's good 95% of the time.
Right.
So obviously there are some times where obviously there's some frustrations and they're like, okay, we need to figure a way out of this. But those, in the, was it 4 years now that we've been there? I think we've only had those conversations once. We thought about having conversations twice, but it's, just being able to navigate that stuff in a healthy way. But just like you said, it's about the people you have surrounding you. Right. Mm-hmm. And like, I didn't realize, you talking about that move now in retrospect, thinking about, we were friends then when you worked at JP Morgan. And like, I didn't realize the significance of you stepping away from JP Morgan then to what it was going to look like, in the next, 4 years after, 3 years after.
Oh, yeah.
It was a drastic change in your lifestyle and everything that you could do or even wanted to do.
Yeah.
Everything changed because of that one decision that you felt like that you needed to make.
Yeah.
We talked about failures before, like,
oh, that whole time frame is
Yeah.
littered with failures.
yeah, but you've learned a lot about it.
Yeah.
Like you've learned a lot about yourself and you've got a lot of those golden nuggets out of those failures that have turned them into successes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think when somebody has not when they're reciting information they know, but when they have an intimate emotional connection to the knowledge and the experience they have, and they've learned it and they can communicate to other people, I think that's what makes somebody's voice resonate. It's the guy that wants to stand up there and talk about, doing something significant that's never taken a risk,
Yeah.
or has come from a pretty cush background, or has these other factors working in their favor, and it's like, well, why that doesn't resonate? It's because there's no it's not authentic.
Yeah.
It's not real. It's not there. I can talk about what I think a football player is going through on the field, but the reality is I have no idea. None. Like, Earl Thomas, when he gets spun around, by Derrick Henry in the playoffs. Everybody's making fun of Earl Thomas, but it's like, I know what I would do if I was Earl Thomas. I would just dive at his ankles and call it a day.
Yeah.
At least Earl stood up like a man. Like I would have just fell down and nobody hope he tripped over me. Because Derrick Henry literally spun another you know what I mean? But it's like that. It's like, so I can tease him, I can meme him, but at the end of the day, it's like I've not been in that fight, so how can I even speak to it?
There's a lot of stuff we can obviously talk about when it comes to this. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about real quick was one of the biggest risks that you never took. You know, so
you're asking me that question.
No. I'm saying maybe,
I already know that answer. Well, like, that's
definitely another podcast.
Yeah.
You know, because like I think about myself and how much educated I am through school. No. But I know you can't tell on the podcast.
It's that OSU education.
It's an
OSU son.
But having my degrees and literally using none of them right now. Good decision, bad decision. But that's definitely another podcast. I'm sure we could get.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to get into that.
Sure.
That'll be fun.
Cool. Well, this is How Stupid People Succeed. I'm Josh, and this is Jeremy. Make sure you like us, subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and check us out on Facebook. Make sure you share the podcast with somebody you think would benefit out of this.
Which would be everybody.
The whole world. Just tag them. Just tag them in the post. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.